So in this video I'm going to teach you about loops, so let's get started. Go ahead and insert a script into service, delete this. And a loop is just something that you can use to execute code multiple times. So let's start with simple while loop, while true do. Put a print here, hello world. And let's put a wait command so that it doesn't run too fast and cause a crash. So if I go ahead and run this, you can see that it runs infinitely and it's printing hello world. So how this works is that this loop will always run as long as this is true. So if we put this to false, then you can see it doesn't run. So that's pretty similar to how the if statements work in my last video. If you haven't watched that, make sure to watch it. Alright, and then just like an if statement, we can also put a condition in the loop. So let's do that. So I'll make a variable called number, set to 0. Then I'm gonna do while number is less than 10. Then I'll print hello world, and then we'll also add 1 to the number variable. So number equals number plus 1. So all this is doing is just adding 1 to this variable. So now if we were to run this, you can see it prints 10 times because of our condition. So it's true until it reaches that 10th mark. And then we can also print the number to kind of see the progress of this. I'll go ahead and increase the wait time so it's easier to see. So you can see it's going from 1 to 10 and then it stops from there. We also have some keywords that you can use for just loops. So there's 2 keywords, break, and continue. So I'll teach you about the break one first. So let's say we were to do something like if number is equal to 5, then break. And we'll go ahead and run this, and we'll also print the number. Like so. Actually, we'll print it after the break. And then if we were to run this, you can see it goes from 1 to 4, and then what the break does is that it stops the loop from continuing. So once it reaches 5, the break stops the loop. That's what the break does. Next up is continue, so we'll just type in continue here. And this is a recent one that's been added. I think if you're watching other tutorials that are like 2 years older, you won't be able to find this in their videos because it wasn't a thing until recently. So if we were to run this now, you can see it prints 1 through 10 except it skips 5. So you can see it prints 4 and then 6 but no 5. That's because the continue keyword skips a loop cycle. So next up we have something called a for loop, which usually runs a set amount of times. So let's go and delete this, and I'll make a for loop. For I is equal to 1, 10, do, and we'll go ahead and print hello world. And then we'll just test this. So you can see it print hello world 10 times. And then if we change this end number right here to 20, then it will print 20 times, and then if we change something like 200, then it'll print 200 times. So a for loop will run a set amount of times based on this end number right here. So let's change this back to 20, and then this right here is called a start number. So let's say I change this to 10, and then something also special about the for loop is that it gives us a variable called I. Remember that this is just a variable, so we can rename it to whatever we want. We can rename it to this and it'll work, or we can name it to apples and it will also still work. So that's just a variable name. Most people just put I though. And then we can also print I. So we'll go ahead and print I here and also put a wait command to kind of see what I is. So for print I now, you can actually see that I is just the loop cycle amount. So it's going to go from 1 to 20 like so. So I is just essentially just the numbers in between these 2 numbers right here. So and then we can also change the start number right here. So let's say we change it to 10, and then we were to run it. You can see it starts at 10 and then it's slowly working its way up to 20. And because it is a higher number, it also only loops 10 times. So that is the start number. And then lastly, there's also a hidden third number. I like to call it the increment number. So by default, the increment number is 1, and then we'll go ahead and also set this back to 1. So if we were to run this right now, you can see it just goes from 1 to 20 like it usually does. So I'll give it a minute so you can see. That's 120 right there. But if we were to change this increment number right here to, let's say, 2, for example, then you can see instead of adding 1, it adds 2. So it goes 1, 3, 5, 7. You can see it's only adding 2 now. And let's say we're doing something like 5, for example. And let's just change this to 0. We'll run this. And now you can see it's adding by 5 instead of 1. So that is the increment number right there. Lastly, there's something called a repeat loop. Sometimes it is also called a do-while loop. So do-while loop, or it's usually called a repeat loop in Lua, but in other languages sometimes it's called a do-while loop. Personally, I've never used this loop, and I usually don't recommend anyone to use it, but I'm gonna teach it anyway just in case you're reading someone else's code and you have to read their repeat loop. So I'll write a basic repeat loop, repeat, and then until, then we put the code in here. So I'm just gonna print hello world, and I'm also gonna put a wait command. So we can go ahead and run this to test it. You can see it's printing hello world an infinite amount of times, just kind of like a while loop. So this code will only run while this condition is false. When this condition is true, so he sets true like this, it will only run once. And the reason why it runs once is because how a repeat loop works is that it will always guaranteed run the code once, and then it checks the condition last to see if it'll run again. So that's the main difference between a repeat loop and a while loop, is that a while loop will check the condition first and then run the code, whereas a repeat loop will run the code and then check the condition last. And that's why I generally don't like using it. So why are loops useful? So as I said before, loops are used to execute code multiple times. You can see on the spinning part right here that I'm constantly spinning this object, and I'm using a while loop to accomplish that. First, open up the script right here, we can see I'm using a while loop, and then I'm just doing some rotation stuff right here, and that's causing this to spin infinitely. Another example would be something like, let's insert part here, and then let's open up the script. I'm like a while loop. Then I'm going to just change the color of the part, but I'm gonna make it random. So break color.random we'll get a random color. Then I'll increase this weight so no epilepsy is caused. And you can see now it's a random color. And then a pretty good way to use for loops would be, so I'm going to make a basic for loop right here. And basically what I want to do is I want to make a fading part. So I want this part to do this basically, but with a script. And we can do that with a for loop. So transparency takes in a 0 to 1 number, 1 being invisible, and then 0 being visible. So we're going, instead of 1 to 10, we're going to do 0 to 1. And then we also want to change the increment number, because by default it is 1. So, but we want a smaller increment number, so let's just do 0.1. I'm going to print I, and then I'm going to go ahead and change the part's transparency. I'm going to set that to I. Remember, I is just the values between these two numbers, essentially. And I'll put a wait command just to kind of see the progress a little bit. So, if we're going to test this now, you can see it kind of went a little fast there, so I'm going to lower this increment number. So yeah, now you can see it creates a fading part. So that's where the for loop can be used pretty well. So that's the end of the video, guys. Feel free to give the video a like, subscribe, and join my Discord if you want to chat with me and other developers. Also, feel free to comment down below if you want any other tutorials.